Hey everyone, my name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at some malicious compliance stories, so sit back, relax and enjoy. Owner of a small video game studio treats employees badly, doesn't read his own email, and ends up paying thousands for drinks at a company party. I worked at a small, less than 100 people video game studio about a decade ago. The studio did mostly console ports for larger publishers, and was notorious for severely underpaying its employees, and for screwing employees out of contracts so that the boss could make a profit, which he never shared with the company. When I became a manager, I tried to lobby for higher pay for my hourly workers, as the pay was $8 an hour in 2011, and there were 3 guys on my team so broke they were literally living in their car in the parking lot. Boss, who was also co-owner of the studio, frankly said to me, "I will continue to pay $8 an hour until I can't find anyone willing to work for $8 an hour." He was also notorious for bringing on unpaid interns, making them do the work of a full employee, promising them employment at the end of the internship, then breaking his promise. Boss was notorious for being a tightwad. He excluded hourly employees from company meals during overtime and would claim he was feeling generous when he would let the hourlies eat after all the other employees had already cleared out 2/3 of the food, and what was left was stale and congealed. At one point, a contract with a larger company fell through, and Boss Man let half of the studio know about their layoffs by holding a meeting for them in the parking lot, and letting employees know that their jobs were gone, their passes to the door were disabled, and they could expect their belongings mailed back to them in a week. He let some employees go back in to get things like wallets and car keys, but under security escort. Time comes for a release party for a game that got released before this mass layoff happened. Bossman emails out to the whole company, letting everyone know how generous he's feeling, that he's going to allow all of the laid-off employees on the project to come to the release party of the game they made. It was at a swanky place in town known for high-end cocktails, among other things. Bossman writes in his email invite that there was a $15 per drink limit. What he meant to say was that each person at the party had a $15 limit for drinks for the night total. What the bar and everyone else interprets, correctly, as that there was a $15 per drink limit. Employees stifled giggles as they read the email invite that was also sent as instructional to the bar, and excitedly exchanged text messages and emails with the laid-off employees. Bossman is also notorious for not showing up to his own parties until 2 hours in. Cue the night of the party. Everyone shows up bright and early, and as soon as the party officially starts, everyone swarms the bar asking for the most expensive cocktails and liquor the bar had to offer. People were downing French 75s and Ramo's gin fizzes and 35-year-old shots of Glenfiddich. Every employee and former employee was 5 to 6 fancy cocktails in and 3 sheets to the wind by the time Bossman shows up. He saunters in to cheers and pats on the back from laid-off employees, who are so drunk by now that they probably saw 3 of him. He smiles and waves magnanimously, thinking the former and current employees were drowning their sorrows at their own cost. He wanders up to the bar to check in with the barkeep and see what the damage was so far. After 20 seconds of conversation, the smile from his face has disappeared completely and been replaced with a scowl. Words are spoken, barkeep disappears and comes back with the manager. Tenser words are exchanged with the manager, who disappears into a back office and then returns with a piece of paper, presumably a copy of whatever contract Bossman had made for the party. The bar and drinking partiers were in the right. The company at the time was not financially able to handle the price of the drinks, and Bossman was made to pay the cost out of his own pocket. Sadly, he was not able to afford a Porsche and a BMW that year. The company had to shutter about a year after this event. Oh, that's tragic. How is he going to survive without a BMW and a Porsche? Watch your 6-year-old without being asked? Absolutely. This happened several years ago, early internet days. I was around 16 or so, and my mum was going back to college to get a degree. One Saturday morning, she said that one of her classmates was coming over for a study session. No big deal. I was in my room studying for a college-level AP course anyway, so I didn't really pay much attention. Cue arrival of classmate, a 40-something lady with a 6-year-old girl in tow. I didn't realize that until I opened the door for them and invited them in. My mum immediately gushes over the kid, and suddenly I'm being voluntold to watch her while they study. To say nothing of the fact that I have my own studying to do. Kid's mum is perfectly happy to scoot the kid my way without so much as a "would you mind?" or a "thank you." I later discovered that this was planned all along, and my mum purposely didn't tell me because she knew I'd refuse. Fortunately for me, the girl is really sweet and well behaved, but I have nothing, absolutely nothing, that would remotely interest a 6-year-old. My mother tells me we can just listen to music in my room or whatever. Now, bear in mind that every single CD I owned was probably tagged explicit lyrics, and she knew this. I said, "Are you sure you want a 6-year-old listening to Pan?" "Yes, just go and watch her." Okay, off we skip to my room. Here's where the malicious compliance starts. Now, I'm a chronic nibbler when I'm studying. I had a Ziploc bag of candy on my desk. Kid immediately spots the candy and politely asks if she can have some. Cue my most devious Grinch smile. I was told to watch her, so I'm going to watch her. Eat this bag of candy. Imagine, if you will, a 6-year-old girl and a 16-year-old girl listening to stuff like Pantera and Tool and chowing down on candy. After our respective parents' 2-hour wine and bench session, study session, Mum came to fetch kiddo. By this time, the sugar high was starting to take effect. I know it's not real, but dang, this kid got super hyper. Kid starts zooming down the stairs and channeling her inner cat at 3 AM barreling through the hallway. Her mum has to strap her into the car, and it looked something like a human trying to hold onto a buttered, live electric eel. As my mum is watching them leave, I spy her glaring at me out of the corner of her eye. "What did you do to that poor child?" "Oh, I just gave her some candy and we listened to Pantera." "You what?" "I tried to tell you, but you said you didn't care, just to go watch her." The sudden realization of a 6-year-old hyped up on sugar and singing Good Friends and a Bottle of Pills hits my mum like a ton of bricks. She wants to say something, but sounds like a rusty old engine trying to start. She doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Don't you have some bop or something a little more kid-friendly in your collection?" Well, if you had told me beforehand, I probably could have borrowed something from a friend, or went and rented a cartoon movie or something, but you just sprang it on me, so I made you There really was nothing she could say, but you can bet she never asked me to babysit again. I bet that kid kept asking their mum, like, "Oh, can we go back there? I really liked that." Sure, I'll open the door. Many moons ago, 14 years worth if anyone is really counting, I was a senior in high school on blood drive day. If you were 17 plus, you could make an appointment, leave class for at least half an hour, and then go down to the gym to give blood. You even got cookies out of the deal, so of course, my friend, let's call her F, and I signed up. Being 17, neither of us had ever given blood before, but we were both robust, active teenagers and got through the poking and draining with no issue. Eating our cookies and milking the clock as much as possible, being forced out of the gym. We walked back to class with no issues. Listened to 15 minutes of calculus with no issues. Minute 16 hits, and I see my friend out of the corner of my eye looking a little off. I lean over to her and ask if she's okay. She just shakes her head a little and closes her eyes. Minute 17. I'm watching her, waiting for her to slump over in a faint or something, and she turns green. Gross, paint water after doing a landscape green. To date, this is the only time in my life I have seen a person's face that putrid shade. I had always thought the turning green was an expression. Oh no, it's real and it's a precursor to much unpleasantness. I jumped to my feet, pulled my friend up, stammered she's not feeling well to the confused teacher, and dragged her out of the door, hightailing it to the bathroom. We get about halfway there and she whispered, "I'm not going to make it." My brain went into crisis mode and I closed the door to the nearby classroom, pulled the lid off the trash can, and helped hold her hair back as she lost what must have been a week's worth of food along with those cookies. About 5 seconds after the door swung shut, our resident jerk teacher flung it back open from the inside, spitting out, "Don't ever close my door. You don't have the right to close it." In his anger, he obviously didn't see my friend puking her guts out. I calmly let go of friend, looked at him, and pushed the door open as wide as possible, showing the entire classroom what was happening in the hallway. He finally noticed, but by then so had the rest of his room. 2 of his students, chain reaction, sympathy puked, and at least one of those did not hit a trash can. The rest of the class was in chaos, scrambling away from anyone who was sick. Friend finally finishes and stands up. I put the lid back on the trash can and grabbed her around the waist because she's still a little wobbly. I made eye contact with jerk teacher one more time before I walked her down to the office so she could call home. Of course, I left his door open. It would have been even better if the teacher saw it and had a chain reaction to it as well. That would have been the best. Deny our patient access to treatment? I hope you enjoy reading. I help manage an outpatient behavioral health clinic, and we offer a few different treatment options for patients struggling with depression or mental illness. I've never been a huge fan of psych, but I have a good job and I really enjoy advocating for our patients. I won't go into exact treatment details or any patient information, of course, but some of our treatments require extensive prior authorization and coordinating to ensure insurance will cover. I just received a denial over an authorization I worked pretty hard for. The reason was that they claimed to not have received patient health questionnaire, 9 forms we have patients complete. Well, I actually did include the PHQ. 9 forms included the clinical notes I sent over. I guess they just didn't feel like sifting through everything I sent over. Most prior authorizations require as little as a phone call to initiate the process, or perhaps a single form along with adequate documentation. So, I decided to appeal this decision, of course. I included over 130 pages worth of clinical notes, authorization forms, letters of medical necessity, etc. I hope they're not upset with the amount of work I created for them. I'm just adhering to the stringent requirements set by this patient's insurance company. Hey, well, if you're not willing to do your job, then you can do your job harder, I guess. Wow guys, look on screen right now, you see those 2 videos right there? They're pretty good. I think you should click at least one of them and watch another one.